Hello, I'm Richard Burton from the Richard Burton Watercolour channel here on the Yorkshire coast. Now, do you struggle with big skies, trees, buildings and reflections? Well, today we're going to tackle everything and you're going to really enjoy this. This is going to be a really interesting painting to do. It's Yorkshire Dales near Wharfdale and it's got a bit of everything. And we're going to show you how to paint this delightful Yorkshire Dales scene with some relatively simple steps. So let's get down to the painting. Now, I mustn't forget, we've got our watercolour guide that we've been developing over a period now. A number of you, well, a lot of you have subscribed to it. It's in the free link below, so you just grab a copy. It's a free copy. It's 5 steps into watercolour, takes you through the basics and just gets you sort of used to the techniques and tricks into watercolour, so grab yourself a copy. Alongside that, I also want to say we've been sending a newsletter, and in that newsletter we've been asking for any emails, any issues that you have, and a number of people have replied, a lot of people have replied with suggestions about issues they're tackling. And one of the things has been big skies, water and reflections. So what we're going to do, we're going to do this video to help those of you that want guidance on it. So let's get down to the drawing. Firstly, I'm going to establish the horizon line. Make sure that we're not too high. We want to have a nice big sky, so I want to be below the middle of the painting. And the horizon line is the valley, and it drops down both sides down to the river. And then when we got that, I'm going to put in the river banks, both left and right. After establish those, it's then the cottage. The cottage wants to be on to the right hand side, looking sort of into the picture. It's offset, so we've got to get the perspective of this building correctly. So firstly I'm going to do is establish the largest vertical, and then from that I'm then going to work out the vanishing points for the front of the house, which will, both of them will drop down, both the bottom vanishing point and the roof vanishing points will drop down to roughly where the bridge is, and establish that. And then I'm going to sketch in the rest of the building and put the little bit of detail into the windows and various elements to it. And then after we've done that, I'll put the trees in, put a suggestion of where the central trees are, simplifying in the overall scene so it keeps it simple, and then I'll put a suggestion of the reflections in to finish. Okay, so let's get down to the exciting bit and get the painting on. So we start off establishing the colour story, and we also, before we do that though, let's get down to the materials. Materials we're going to use, I've got 300 gram paper, I've taped it down onto the board. We've also got 3 brushes, which is going to be a number 12, a number 8 and number 4. And we also want to have some 2-ply tissue ready to lift off some of the clouds. So that's the materials. For the colour sky, what we want to mix, I want to have a range of this colour story, which is going to be yellow ochre, which is going to be background wash, really pale, not too strong, but that's going to set the mood, give it a mood to the sky. I then want a blue, which is going to be ultramarine blue, and then I'm going to have a little bit of Prussian blue by the side of it, so we get a bit of colour change in the blue as we apply it into the sky. I'm then going to want to make a grey, which is going to be burnt umber and ultramarine blue. It's going to be a warm grey. And then I'm also going to have a little bit of alizarin crimson just ready as well, just to be able to drop in. Also, we're going to put some cobalt blue with a touch of alizarin crimson as a final mix, ready for some ripples on the water. Okay, so we're going to wet the paper first. Make sure we've got a nice even wetting of the paper. And then when I've done that, we're going to mix the yellow ochre, apply that, relatively pale, that sets the mood, drop that in from the top to the bottom, and then I'll get my tissue, screw up this tissue, and then roll it on the surface to lift off the clouds that I wanted. Try to sort of use this to shape the clouds to get that feeling of the actual shape. Once I've done that, I'll then get the blues, which is going to be firstly going to be the ultramarine blue, high in the sky. Drop that in, it will diffuse down, it will find some lovely what I call lost and found edges. It will find some edges where we've lifted the cloud off, and then it will diffuse down on its own around the clouds, which will just give that sort of natural feel to the clouds. Bring that down. As I come down with that blue, I'm going to drop in a little bit of Prussian blue into that middle distance and into the background. That will just give that colour change on the blue, which you often do get in sky. It just captures the atmosphere of the sky and it'll look more realistic. When that's done, again, just watch for the edges. I'll just squeeze my brush, just lift a little bit off here and there, just to make sure that we've got an even mix of colour, even level of colour, not too many pooling of water. And then I'll drop in some greys into the side of the clouds, just to give that little bit of a three-dimensional feel to the clouds. And I'll also add a little bit of alizarin crimson just into the horizon area. That will just give that extra feeling of depth and realism to the clouds. Now we're going to move to the water. We've already pre-wet the water, and what we're going to do is we're going to drop that, pretty much replicate to a certain degree what we've done in the sky. We'll put the yellow ochre in, let that diffuse, and then once I've done the yellow ochre, I'm then going to drop in the blue, which is going to be the ultramarine blue in the foreground, and then drop in a little bit of more Prussian blue as we go a little bit further in. So you've got that mimicking the sky above. Once I've done that, we're going to let that soak in, and then this is a really magical bit where you've just got to get this right. It's about the timing. We're going to put the little bit of feeling of ripples in the water, and that's where that cobalt blue and alizarin crimson that we made goes in. We're just waiting for the timing for the move from being really wet to being just damp and moist. And once the surface is damp and moist, we'll just put a few brush strokes of this light grey onto the surface just to give the feeling of the ripples. Okay, so now the sky is dry, we're going to deal with the land. And that starting off, we're going to mix some distant colour, which is going to be cobalt blue and light red. We're going to apply that into the distance, and then we're going to get the brush and squeeze out the water and lift it off just to give that diffusion to the distance. I'm going to carefully paint round the trees and the cottage at this stage because it's just a distant colour and I don't want to lose those strong trees. And then after I've done that, we're going to mix an overall wash for the land and the green areas, which is going to be of yellow ochre and raw sienna for the distance. And then I'm going to add more yellow ochre for the foreground, which will give that brown wash, which will give that diffusion, but also help to give that feeling of colour perspective. I'm going to apply that, and then while I'm applying that, I'm going to drop in, while it's on the moist, I'm going to drop in the greens. I'm going to have a green for the distance and a transitional green for the foreground. The distant green is going to be Prussian blue, lemon yellow and raw sienna, which will just drop into the distance. And as I come into the foreground, which is essentially the sides of the riverbank, I'm going to make a more vibrant green, which will be Prussian blue, lemon yellow and yellow ochre. And let those drop in and diffuse into the existing underwash. And then I'm going to apply some yellow ochre over the buildings. Just a pale wash, but it'll just take the white away and it'll just give us something for us to put the stone walls onto. The next I'm also going to put a yellow ochre wash on the reflection of the buildings. So everything is pretty much now covered. And then we're going to work on the distant trees. And I'm going to mix a couple of mixtures of ultramarine blue, yellow ochre for that sort of distant tree colour, and then add a little bit of crimson in it to give a bit of shade. And that's just going to be carefully applied to those distant trees, but missing out those specimen focal trees. So now I'm going to lift off some of the distant trees just to give that little bit of diffusion, and then we'll let that dry. And then it's about the focal trees, the main sort of vibrant colour for the focal trees. I'm going to achieve that with lemon yellow, Prussian blue and a little bit of yellow ochre. We're going to drop those colours in to give some shape for those trees, and then as it is still on the damp, I'm going to add a little bit of darker tone for the shadow of the trees as well. Okay, so now we're going to start with a little bit of a sort of detail washes, I call it really. Well, we're going to start with the stone wall and the hedge on the right hand side. The hedge is going to be alizarin crimson and burnt sienna, quite vibrant colour. Get a bit more of that red in there, and they're going to drop in some dark into there with ultramarine blue and a bit of burnt umber. And then I'm going to work over to the left, and then I'm going to put the hedge in, and I'm going to put the stone wall in. The stone wall is going to be light grey with a little bit of yellow in it, and then as I go across I'm going to put the other stone wall beyond the cottage, which again is going to be cobalt blue and a little bit of light red, and then making a darker green. I'm building up a range of colours on my palette now, and you can sort of see that range of greys. I'm going to take that across. I'm going to put a few green marks under the trees to give some shade. I'm going to give a little bit of shape to the banking as well, just on the riverbank, just to put some darks in. So I've got some dark green now. I'm building up this range of tones on my palette. As you can see, that colour story is starting to develop, and I'm just going to apply that here and there to give some sort of sense of a little bit more detail and definition to the picture. Okay, so now we're going to concentrate on the cottage. I'm going to work from the top to the bottom, and from the front face being the last piece to be done. At the top, I'm going to start with the chimneys, which is going to be burnt sienna, just to get that nice rich redness on the burnt sienna. And then I'm going to put the chimney breasts, which are going to be cobalt blue and raw sienna. After I drop that in and let that soak, I'm then going to deal with the roof. The roof of the cottage has got that lichen look on it, which has got some old slate, but it's got lichen growing in it. So I'm going to use raw sienna initially, and then into that, once I put that raw sienna, I'm going to drop in some blue, which will just diffuse and find its sort of feet in there, and having that diffusion will give that feeling, that oldie worldy roof. And then I'm going to do something similar then for the gable end of the building. Again, once in, drop in some yellow with a little bit of cobalt blue and just let that diffuse in. And then as I come down, I'll put a few marks of darks in there as well. Let that settle in, and then I'll deal with the front of the building, which obviously we've got that yellow ochre wash. I don't want to be too strong because I want to maintain that being the lightest part, which is catching the light. So I'm going to drop some raw sienna into there, shape that to give some character for the old stone wall, and then I'm going to drop in some cobalt blue, and that will, if I drop it in while it's on the moist, it will just nicely granulate and give that extra texture. Okay, so now we're going to drop down to a smaller brush, and I'm going to put the darks in, which is going to be under the eaves of the roof. We're going to put the windows in, we're going to put the doors in, and a suggestion of some of the tiles on the roof as well. That's going to be a mix of darks. I've got them in my palette now, I've got a range, but I'm going to be using cobalt blue, light red. I'm also going to be using ultramarine blue, burnt umber, with a little bit of alizarin crimson to get a real strength of dark. So just to put the variety of darks in to build out a bit of detail and a bit of suggestion of detail as well. And then also, after I've done that, I'm then going to cascade across the picture and add some further darks to the riverbank, under the trees, on the nearby bank as well. Just suggestions of little bits of dark and texture. Now we get to the really exciting bit, which will really bring it to life, which are the reflections. And the reflections, first of all, I'm going to wet the areas where the reflections are. So I've just got a clear understanding of those areas. And then I'm going to start with the trees. I'm going to get some of the green. I want it to be a little bit darker than what we see in the actual trees themselves. I'm going to drop that in to those areas, let it diffuse. And then as I put that initial wash in, I'm also going to drop a little bit of stronger dark into the reflections, just onto the damp, just so that the colour will hold its shape but diffuse, and then you'll get that feeling of moving reflections, which will be really effective with this painting. Once I've done that, I then go over to the right hand side and put the cottage in. Start with a lighter grey, drop that into there, and then gradually build up the grey and put some stronger dark in. But the stronger dark needs to go onto a moist surface, not a wet, so I can put marks to give a suggestion of the eaves of the roof reflecting. Also some sort of verticals just to capture the feeling of windows in there. But they all need to be done just on that damp surface, not wet but damp, so you can put marks in. They'll just diffuse a little bit, but they'll hold essentially their shape. And if you do that, you'll get that lovely feeling of reflective diffusion, which will just really make the picture come to life with a magical touch. Okay, so we've established that. Now what we're going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit more dark here and there. I'm also going to lift off a little bit of the reflections as well, just to make sure I've got that contrast between the building and the tree that's reflecting, so we can capture that feel. And then it's just a case of just getting a little bit of balance, standing back at it, having a look. If I need to add a few more darks here and there, just to give us a bit more focus and a little bit more definition, I'll do that. And then after that, we'll put a mount round it and we've got a picture. So there we are. There's a picture. I put a mount around it as I usually do, and it is our painting of the Wharftail. I'm really quite pleased with it. I think we've got what we're after. My feeling was wanting to capture that mood and atmosphere in the sky, which was one of the big issues that we sort of had a number of you onto us. We've got that distant rolling hills with a distant woodland, coming into the foreground with a few specimen trees, the cottage and the river flowing by. And we've got the feeling of what we wanted. By layering the washes, applying the values to the colour and layering the cottage with a bit of a plan, we've got that feeling of old world stone cottage, which is what we wanted to capture. I hope you enjoyed that. It's been a process of following certain steps and stages, and if you break those steps into simple steps that you can do in manageable chunks, you can really put it together and you can get a really great painting. So I hope you've enjoyed that. And I also want to say thank you. We've now got 4,500 subscribers to the channel, which is massive considering we're only 10 months old, which is really wonderful. So it's a big thank you to you all. And if you haven't subscribed and you've just come across us, please do like and subscribe. It helps us get picked up by a wider audience, which is a really big help, and it helps us celebrate watercolour. Now, if you've got any comments about any future videos or anything we can help you with, please put them in the comments below. And in the meantime, I want you to enjoy and keep painting.